Hello everyone, welcome back after the break. We're fully refreshed here in Stockholm. My name's Steve Caswell, I'm Head of Sales for all markets outside the US. Just one brief slide about me before we dive into something more interesting. I joined Episurf in January. Prior to that I had 11 years as a chartered physiotherapist in both NHS and private settings. I then spent 7 years at Stryker in joint replacement business in various roles from sales management, Mako Robotics, and then latterly as Director of Strategic Capabilities. I was originally attracted to Episurf's 3D MRI capability. I believe that's a world-leading capability and something that we can make more of in the future. I genuinely believe that this implant platform will play an increasing role in the early surgical management of these patients moving forward. And I personally would like to consider the impact that this technology could make when partnered with a robotic platform, although that's not a corporate strategy as of today. So you've heard today from Patrick already that this patient segment, this gap patient, is getting an increasing amount of attention in the US. That's very similar globally. We're seeing a number of multiple podium presentations in large markets, new markets and existing markets. We've had presentations in Israel, Australia, Germany recently at DKOU, Dr. Costa's presenting cases, but also Tobias Young presenting cases in Berlin. We've also had presentations at India at IASCON conference, over 1,000 surgeons seeing the European experience of the Episealer technology. And then in breakouts in ESCA conference in Paris, both our talus and our knee symposiums were very well attended. So you've heard Paul explain that we're going into a period of global expansion and commercial focus. You've probably heard that before. What I'd like to explain to you today is what that really means for where Episurf Medical are now. The reality is we have done 1,300 cases globally. This is a really strong base to then move on and take the next step into growth. We have established various global partnerships and announced a number of market firsts, first talus cases, first knee cases, first product registrations. These are all very positive steps. But the reality is many of these contracts have been set up between 2019 and 2021, and the onboarding has been significantly impacted by the COVID pandemic. And challenges getting the right partners in these markets is not unusual. We'll continue to assess our position with partners globally. We do have some fantastic partners, but we'll continue to stay close to that as we move forward. So we have a direct and an indirect model that is absolutely normal for our stage in market development. We are investing in resource for both, and both models have a very clear focus and incentives aligned with our commercial strategy. And this year we are carrying vacancies in our sales teams, so we are yet to feel the full benefits of investment in both our direct and indirect model. So the reality is, although we have a solid base, a good number of cases done, we are still getting started in many countries. So what does getting started really mean for Episurf in new markets? The reality is we are building or rebuilding trust in the procedure of focal resurfacing. Focal resurfacing itself is not a new concept. First generation implants have gone before us. You've heard Mr. Spalding mention this earlier. And they have had high failure rates reported in significant large international registries. For example, the Australian National Joint Registry, which is a well-respected registry globally. You can see here first generation failure rates. Right out to 5 years and 6 years, you're talking of revision rates around 25 to 30%, significant revision rates. And then you've heard Mr. Spalding present to you our data around an 8% revision rate at 5 years, which he clearly says is a low revision rate in this category. You can also see how we compare to other treatments, other treatment options for this patient group. We're very happy with our revision rate and how the implant is performing. So focal resurfacing itself, combined with advanced technologies, is actually a very good idea. And I'd like to just cover briefly some of the differentiators in the market as to why we know we're doing so well. Firstly, indication. You've heard indication mentioned a number of times today of how this is so important. All of our customers get a significant amount of data about the patient, about the lesion, the size of the lesion, the location of the lesion, and whether a small implant is actually suitable for their treatment. Moving on, we're talking about personalization of the implant. All implants, the articulating surface is matched to an MR. Also, the depth of the implant is varied depending on the involvement of subchondral bone. And of course, the size and location of the implant is varied per patient. The instrumentation, you've heard from Mr. Spalding and also Dr. Costas, is how important this instrumentation is to provide a really stable bony preparation bed for the implant itself. 3D printed instrumentation based on the MRI scan. And then moving on to the implant itself. A A step in the right direction towards a monoblock implant seems to be making a difference to the results, but also the patent of having HA hydroxyapatite coating around the body of the implant seems to be making a significant difference, allowing the cartilage to grow into the implant to seal the joint surface. So once we've been getting started in these new markets, we really get surgeons to accept that the advanced implant platform and personalized resurfacing is a safe and effective procedure. We then see them starting to think about what the implant looks like in an expanded treatment algorithm. You've heard the term expanded treatment algorithm a couple of times today. So what does that really mean? Many markets that we enter have already got an established arthroplasty pathway. That means that the first implant a patient is often offered will probably be a uni knee that you see in the middle of the screen in front of you, and some patients will be a total knee that will be the first implant that's offered to them. There's an increasing interest in the market of delaying a total knee replacement as being the index procedure, moving that procedure as far to the right as possible. We know that delaying this procedure by 5 years can prevent 17% of revisions. That's the procedure you see on the right-hand side. Revisions are very costly, not only for the health system, but also for the patient. They're increased risk of infection and often don't do quite so well from a functional recovery perspective. So it's really important that we start to get this wider algorithm accepted. When you think about all the treatments that the patient may be subjected to prior to the uni, they're often kept in the community, managed conservatively with physiotherapy, injections, bracing. They may be referred in for biological procedures depending on their age or healing capacity. And almost certainly many patients will be subjected to a microfracture procedure, and we're seeing many failed microfractures procedures being sent in to Episurf to provide an Episealer device. So we really have to change mindsets to try and delay TK intervention and drive this acceptance of an expanded treatment algorithm. We have a really solid option in this pre-uni space. You've heard low revision rates, good patient-reported outcome measures, maintained function, whether that be activities of daily living, return to sport, and certainly quality of life measures are returning. But importantly, we're preserving healthy cartilage on both the femur and also the tibia. And because we don't have to resect, we don't have to make an incision, a cut across the tibia, we can preserve the meniscus, which helps the knee feel more normal for the patient for longer. So it's really important that once we get this gradual clinical acceptance, that we start to see an increase in implant run rate. Surgeons often like to get started by sending us some scans to test the system, see how they read the damage marking reports. They might often wait for a perfectly round, ideal indication on the medial femoral condyle. They then naturally want to wait and see how their first patient does. And we know after having implanted implants for over 10 years, you heard from our first patient earlier, they do very well. And surgeons only then will start to widen their indications. And for us, that then means an increase in implant run rate, which is why Pål has such a focus in his reports on customer acquisition rate. It's essential for us to be adding customers at a really high rate every quarter. And I'm really pleased that the team have grasped that, and they're really trying to add customers at a faster rate. So let's look at our more established markets. For example, Germany, where we've been selling the implant since 2016. We were certainly on a good growth trajectory prior to the pandemic. Yes, there was some turbulence from a quarter-by-quarter basis, and you can see that the pandemic certainly lost a little bit of momentum for us. The pleasing thing is we are seeing a good recovery. We will recover back to pre-pandemic status very soon. But also we've lost a little bit of that turbulence on a quarter-by-quarter basis, starting to build on momentum on a quarter-by-quarter basis, which is a real positive step forward. And we have no doubt that we can mimic that growth rate in other markets. If we zoom back out for a moment, we can look at our direct structure overall. There is no doubt that this year the team are going through a little bit of a culture change. We have some great people that really have accountability to grow their business. They grow their knee business, to grow their ankle business, and also to add customers at a faster rate. We have a team of 11 sales representatives, which is a good number for a company of our size. We're carrying vacancies in the GSA region, in Nordics, and also in our indirect channel management, so looking after our distributors and agents across the globe. We've also increased resources in our indirect channel management team this year. We previously only had one person looking after all markets outside the US, all indirect markets outside the US. We now have 3, 4 including me, so much more resource focused on driving the business forward in these markets. We have had some changes in our main markets, such as Germany, UK, and Nordics. I'll mention those a little bit more in a moment. All of the team are focused on the need to drive a reimbursement strategy in each market and have a really good focus on moving those forward. You've heard already from Dr. Costas that there is this demand for using the device in more end-stage focal lesions, really truly in the pre-uni space. And also, very interesting to see the traction of multiple implant cases. Not only Dr. Costas, multiple customers in multiple markets requesting us to present them to them multiple cases. So I've mentioned we've made some changes in the UK, Germany and Nordics, and I'll summarise those briefly now. In the UK, we did have 2 direct salespeople and now working on our indirect channel team to really help drive a better onboarding process in multiple markets. They know the product well and they can certainly accelerate that process. We also had a smaller distributor in the Midlands that we unfortunately had to terminate. And now we have a national distributor, full coverage across the whole of the UK, and they have good experience of selling personalised devices. So I have no hesitation to say that we're well placed in the UK to take the next step and grow. In Germany, we had a split north and south, including Switzerland. We now have just one region. We've brought Austria into that direct model, and we have one strong sales leader leading a team of 5 sales representatives. We are still carrying one vacancy. And the Nordics, we're recruiting a business development director for a refreshed approach to the Nordics. The team are very clear that we have to drive and focus on our sales execution. They know that we're expecting to see aggressive growth in the knee platform. They know that we want to see growth and support to gather further clinical data on the Talus, the ankle product. And they also know that we expect to increase our customer base at an accelerated rate. Of course, we'll add additional markets, and we'll mention that in a moment or two, but they also will take responsibility at growing their own customer base much more quickly. You'll hear all the things that they can leverage, the patient-specific messaging that's very much on trend, superior clinical results that Mr. Spalding presented to you. We have a wide network of global KOLs that help with peer-to-peer selling, which you've heard is so important. A fantastic software capability to leverage. We'll have knee and ankle-focused marketing strategies that the team can execute upon. And we'll also have a direct-to-patient marketing campaigns in those markets that are ready for that. For example, Germany and the UK. So a couple of slides on just some focused markets prior to a summary slide. I won't cover all markets, that might take us a little while. So our European partners that we expect to support much more closely, if we take a look at Italy first, our Italian partners have had a really good start. Started our business off in the northern parts of Italy. Good traction with our Talus product, but they do know that we expect more traction in other parts of Italy, but also more growth traction with our knee products. They have a good plan to execute on that over the next coming months, and I have no doubt that our Italian partners are well placed to deliver on growth in both platforms. Spain and Portugal, again, big markets. We've already got started with first initial cases, and we will support our partners in those markets to accelerate the growth in those markets. We're also open to recruiting a Spanish and Portuguese business development manager in this region, and we're very happy to start those recruitment processes soon. Same again in France. We've got started and we're ready to take the next step. We're just discussing what resources we need in the French market to drive that growth a little bit faster. There are some reimbursement challenges in France, but that might change in the first 1 or 2 quarters next year. There are some changes there. Poland, we're seeing some green shoots of growth in both the Talus and the knee platform. We do have study sites in Poland, and we're already speaking to additional sales agents in Poland to help us drive further growth in that market. I'd already mentioned the UK, and I believe we're now well placed in the UK to take the next step, certainly with NICE guidelines being published. It all adds to our momentum in this market. We have a strong pipeline, particularly in the south. India, one of the fastest growing healthcare markets globally. It's great to be present and done a first knee case in India. We also have first Talus cases in the pipeline, so our ankle product in the pipeline. And we've built a relationship with 2 very experienced business consultants in India to help us build a scale plan in various regions in India. I'm excited to be present in that market. The Middle East, we just signed our first distribution agreement in the Middle East last week. A couple more regulatory steps, and then we can actively sell in this region. And the team will be onboarding those distributors now. Australia, we'd already mentioned we expect Australia to be a cautious market because of the performance of first-generation implants. But this is still an important global market that we'd like to be present in. We've had first in-person meetings, recently had a presentation at the Australian Knee Society meeting, and we again have invested in senior business consultant based in Sydney to help us penetrate this market. And in fact, I'm out in Sydney and Melbourne next week to further those opportunities. We still have other big markets on the horizon. Paul has mentioned South America previously. This still is on the plan, and our regulatory team will soon turn their attention to these markets. We do want to go to South America, but we want to do so with Brazil first, clearly scale of market being one of the drivers. We know Chile has got lower barriers to entry, but the Anvisa application will be prioritised. Also, if we were to invest in a Portuguese-speaking business manager, that will help us in this region also. We just finalised a distribution agreement in Taiwan only this week, with registration processes starting for the knee soon. Turkey and the Balkan regions, I'll be spending more time in those markets over the coming months, really to assess whether the ASP that we're after is suitable for those markets. Canada remains on the list, but we have more work to do on our QMS system in 2023 prior to being able to do the registrations in Canada. And then China and Japan, clearly huge opportunity markets, still remain on our opportunity list, but we do need to continue to explore the data that's required in those markets. So in summary, I hope you see that we have solid foundations in place to go on and take the next step and accelerate growth further. In our direct markets, they are going through a period of transition, but they have a very clear plan focused on sales execution. Those markets where we are more established, we need to be confident and be more aggressive to take market share in these markets. And some markets are ready for more direct-to-patient communication along a private healthcare provider. Our indirect markets will remain key, and we'll allocate resources as appropriate. We need to ensure we have great partners in each market who are motivated to sell the product. And many markets, though, as I've explained, we are still just getting started, driving acceptance of those expanded algorithms. We've talked to you about category creation and how changing existing treatment algorithms does take time. But on the whole, we are getting good market acceptance on the need for Episealer. We do have many significant markets still to enter in the short and mid-term. And the 510K products that you've already heard from Patrick earlier, and you'll get more detail from Katerina in a moment, there is a huge opportunity in some of our existing markets for these products. They're in established OA markets with a reimbursement pathway. And by the time we get our hands on these products, we will have a robust commercial model in place, and most importantly, we'll have brand equity with a wider group of surgeons. So thank you for your time. I'm going to now pass over to my colleague, Katerina.